share the spotlight with New York City and other the key European fashion capitals. It has all the cards to become a high-profile incubator for new designers, a diving board for fertile creative minds and new levels that can establish their roots here and grow, forging in a new fashion identity for this city. Not only does Miami bring with positive energy, but it strikes the perfect balance between business, art, and fashion. It boasts a strategic geographical position that makes it a buzzing crossroad between the US, Europe, and South America. While it is a window on a multicultural world, it shouldn't stay that at the window when it comes to being part of the fashion game. And we all want to play hard and be part of the action. And my people knows, my motto was always go big or go home, and today we're playing very big. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen Kolb and Never Use.
Thank you. Can you hear us? Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
All right, good.
Good. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. He landed this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something extraordinary. He looks so fresh. I mean, it took me XXX amount of hours to really get this ready. So, I mean, it's not a topic of our conversation, but how do you do it?
Well, ask me tomorrow. My flight back to New York is at 6 a.m. I don't think I'm so fresh then, so I'll send you a selfie.
I really want to thank everyone who turned out today. I see a lot of familiar faces, incredible people who really make Miami what it is. And also the students, welcome. This is absolutely dedicated to you. We really, like Hakan said, we really want to make Miami the place where the conversation of fashion is elevated.
How many are actually students?
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Awesome. That's great.
How many are designers? How many are friends of Eva? Just kidding. How many know Stephen? So, I mean, you're one of the most important names in fashion in the United States. We can say that. And just to summarize your job description, it would be to support and promote the world of American design. But this is just the beginning 8 words of what you do and consumes your day and work. You advise the designers, and I can go later on in detail of all the other projects, but you help and you coach 500 designers and brands. How would you describe your job in your own words, and how do you do it?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I work with a tremendous team at CFPA. We're 25 people, and what's great about the team is we really range in age from young kids in their 20s, I guess I'm the oldest, up to me in my 50s, and I think that multi-generational energy is really important, particularly in fashion. Our work is very much defined through a specific timeline. We look at the lifeline of a designer, and in everything we do touches that lifeline, that point of a designer's career, whether that be students all the way up to designers who are no longer working in the industry but still have an emotional connection to the industry and CCFBA as a family. Beyond the staff that we have, we're very fortunate as an organization to have the support of the industry. So there isn't a person or category of the industry that doesn't get involved in CFDA, from editorial, whether that be traditional media or new media. So we have Ava Chen, who's a big supporter from Instagram. We have Anna Winter. So you have both the balance of the new and the traditional. Retail, e-commerce partners like Stitch Fitch and Amazon, but also the big brick and mortars, Barney's and Neiman Marcus, and the mass level from J. Crew and Kohl's. So we really are an industry, a community of the industry that all has a shared effort and interest in really making American fashion the best it can be.
I don't know if many people know this, but Stephen doesn't come from fashion. He was raising funds for HIV, AIDS, and cancer, and suddenly you got immersed in this new world. What were the obstacles, and what was the advantage of not coming from fashion?
I didn't know how to dress. Actually, a former president of CFDA, a guy named Stan Herman, told me when I first started I looked like a country hick. But I think I've done pretty good change since I started. You know, the obstacles, there weren't really that many, to be honest. CFDA is a not-for-profit. Everything I did before CFDA was not-for-profit. When I was working in HIV and AIDS or cancer, the focus was creating programs and supporting people that have illnesses, or in supporting organizations that were helping those people. And so you kind of shift that into a business organization. It's the same thing. We're helping people. We're helping people in their businesses. We're helping students. So that the idea of giving and helping has always been core to what my work has been, and always something that was interesting to me from the very beginning. I never wanted to work in corporate America. It scared me. You know, these kind of like big bosses and the big back leather chairs, they just weren't people that I related to. So I always wanted to be more in kind of an emotional, direct connection. So that was very similar. The part on the fashion side, when I started in 2006, in January 2006, I knew Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, and Calvin Klein. I didn't know who Promises was, and they were probably the biggest young brand of that period. They had just won CFDA World Fashion Fund, so I had to learn who the designers were, and I also had to understand like how clothes were made, how clothes were designed, how clothes were sourced, the supply chain, what a factor was. I didn't know what that was, and that came pretty easily, and the industry was so generous in helping me learn that. So I had to learn the business of fashion.
You refer to, the CFD as a family, and it is a family, and there's a power of going into this business as a collective power rather than flying solo. Could we say that you are the head of this family?
Well, I don't know if I'm the head, but I would say that somebody described me once. Patrick Robinson has a line called Pashko, and he designed Paco Rabanne, and he was at the Gap for a very long time, and at Perry Ellis, and he's a very established designer. And someone interviewed him once and asked him what I was like, and he said it was like being in high school and you're in the hallway with your friends, and then the principal comes around the corner, and all of a sudden you've got to pay attention. So maybe I'm the principal of it all. I think Diane is really our chairwoman, Diane McPherson, probably is really the head of the family, the godmother at all, because she's a designer and she has that relationship. So she's the mom, and I'm like the principal. Right.
So for those that don't know, Stephen is in charge, among many responsibilities, the CFDA Fashion Awards, which are the Oscars, basically, of the fashion business. The CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, which, as you know, has helped launch and promote the careers of great designers. He's in charge of the fashion calendar, but no, he's not the one you ask tickets for the show, so just to make that disclaimer. And he's also in charge of the Men's Fashion Week and the Fashion Incubator. He does partnerships with many brands to be able to mentor, help, promote, finance. I mean, revenue is a big area of his business. Many times we think of fashion as something very glamorous, and it is, but we cannot forget that it is a big business. And a lot of careers and a lot of people's lives depend on it. You multitask. You have mastered the art of multitasking. 25 people, he does this with 25 people. When you see designers opening their businesses, creating their business plans, and you have to do all of this, what advice would you give them to be able to do as much as you do with many times little staff? Because we've heard many times designers complain and rightfully so, I don't have many people do these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends upon the point in someone's life when they're starting that business. I would say for students that are graduating, I wouldn't start a business. I would go work for someone. I would go work for Michael Kors or Ralph Lauren or Alexander Wang, whoever you can get that job with, and just hang out there for a couple of years and more or less apprentice and learn where they make clothes, learn how they sell clothes, learn merchandising, like really work and not have the pressure of a payroll or keeping the lights on or paying the bill. So that to me, I think, is sometimes because of YouTube and people getting to get access to fashion so quickly, we've created a culture of immediacy and young people thinking that, oh, I just can start a business, I have good taste, and it doesn't really work that way. So I would say gain experience, but if you're fortunate enough to have funding, which is a big part of it, and no matter what point a designer is in their career, funding is always what they're looking for. But if you're fortunate enough to have friends or family where you can do some initial collect some initial investment money, you have to have a point of view, you have to have an idea. No one needs another rap dress, somebody already did it. So you have to figure out what it is that you bring to the market that is unique and that the customer wants. And you also have to know that in the end of the day, it is a business, so how you spend money is the most critical part of what you do, your P&L, your budget. I will often talk to designers who are in early stages of their career and like, well, we're going to have a big fashion show, or we're going to have 400 people, or we're going to do it here, or we're going to get that, and it's not a good idea because all of that money spent is better spent in product development, developing an e-commerce site, digital site, merchandising. And so I would just say that look at it as a business first, and look at yourself as a business person first and a designer second. And that to me would be the advice I would give.
I don't want to put down the spotlight, but any tips on getting funding?
Funding's hard, really hard, and it's raining now. The funding is...
it's kind of like a tropical storm.
We're safe. Most investment money, no one's going to look at you until you've reached $10 million, right? And how do you get to $10 million? Again, it's being a very smart business person and having an idea that is unique and fresh to the market. Friends and family, if you're lucky enough, is usually a first round of funding that can launch you. I think side work, when you're starting, if you can ghost design for someone, and I don't mean like wait tables or do something that's not designed, but often there's consultancy work you can do with a brand, but you have to really have a tight P&L and know that maybe if you hit $5 million, that someone might look at you, but it really isn't until $10 million. So it's the question people ask me a lot, and I wish I just had an easy answer and said, this is how you get money, but you have to attract money. You have to be doing something that people take notice to, and then they know that, or they think that they can make money on that. Because no one's going to give you money to be an artist. They're going to give you money because they expect to make money on giving you money, and you have to look at it that way. And until you can show them through an investment plan and a business plan that you are actually, maybe not when you're having the conversation, but that you are in the direction to make money, that's when people will pay attention to you.
You've talked about the importance of studying the mechanics of fashion, beyond style, and how to then take that into production. Everyone is so focused on fashion design that sometimes are they aware of the needs of the market? Are they understanding what the market is going to look like from 4 years from now? I mean, in a world where technology and trends are changing, well, I think that by the time that we get out of this, there's going to be a new trend and a new way of doing things. I mean, how can you prepare for the job of tomorrow when you are a student, when you are deciding what career you're going to enroll in? What advice would you give them?
Well, there's so much information out there. Obviously, being at a talk like this is a good example of how you gain information or build relationships. Don't underestimate relationships. I think that's the most important part of building a career, is the people that you connect to, and not taking those relationships for granted. For example, the reason I'm here is because we met in Mexico City a few years back, and we stayed in touch, and Ava invited me to come. That's the only reason I'm here. I mean, great school, and I'm excited to be in Miami, but it's about relationships. So, you know, those relationships that you build are also information sources. So talks like this, but easy, like look at any fashion blog. You can see trends, you can see what's happening. Business of Fashion certainly is, if you're not reading Business of Fashion, you should be reading Business of Fashion, because that is not just looking at fashion in regions, but a real global perspective. But I think the biggest source of knowledge is at your fingertips. So if you're a designer and you're on social media, you're on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever it is that you like to do, there's so much data there that you can kind of, in an unsophisticated way, that you can mine and you can really see. You can see what people are responding to. You can see how things are being linked back to your Instagram, and I think that is such an important tool, is really kind of paying attention to how people are paying attention to you.
Actually, talking about the business of fashion, there's an article by Lauren Sherman that says that the schools are producing more designers than the U.S. economy can absorb. What's your stance on that?
It's probably true, and I think it's partly the schools who are creating that oversaturation, but it's also this idea of what fashion has become. Fashion 15 years ago was still a little bit under the radar. You read Vogue magazine, you didn't really see it online, you read other magazines, you shopped it, but as soon as Project Runway came on TV, everybody wanted to be a designer, and everybody saw what it meant to be a designer, or at least the surface of that. So you had this influx. So there is an oversaturation, but that's probably true in a lot of industries, right? And what that means is the best are going to rise to the top, and others are going to maybe not make it. And that's just the hard reality. And we see that with designers, and often I'll see a designer who's had a show and tried season after season, and it's a hard conversation to have, but sometimes you want to say, and you do have to say, maybe you need to think of something different. But I think it is really just trying and keeping at it, and again, the best will rise to the top. And remember, and maybe you're going to ask me this question, because I got to see the answer to the questions before I was on stage. There are other jobs in the industry besides being the designer, right? You know what is the hardest job right now that nobody wants to be anymore? Powder makers. And that is one of the most creative, interesting jobs in our industry. It's such an artistic job. And I think someone out of school can really make a nice salary and really get a really creative fulfillment out of that. But you see powder making, you see fabric sourcing, even in factories. Like, factory jobs are not factory jobs. They're really creative jobs, and there's a lot of opportunity I see with young people starting new production facilities. So there are other tracks into fashion jobs other than just being the designer that I think probably offset that saturation.
Right. And, you know, we've seen, you and I, throughout our careers, great, talented designers that at the end of the day don't really have the success that they in their heads imagine. And I think that sometimes, I don't know your thoughts about this, but sometimes you really have to follow your gut, and you have to follow your passion, but you cannot be deaf to good advice. And we've seen over and over again many designers really not listening to good advice from people that are trying to, guide them in the best direction. There are some designers here. How can we tell them to listen more and who to listen to?
I think it's a good question, and it's something that you really have to take it from the source, right? I think anyone who has a business and wholesales a business, who wholesales their collection to retail will get feedback from buyers. Well, it should be this way or that way, and then they're like, no, that's not how I designed it. And that is really having a trust, and getting back to the relationship with the buyer, because sometimes you want to listen to that. But if they're totally taking what was a core design and just 360 redesigning it, then that's not kind of feedback you want, right? But if it's about length, color, shape, whatever that are minor support or feedback, then that's a good thing. The thing to keep in mind too about being a designer is you ask a young designer what their goal is, they'll say, well, I want to be a global lifestyle brand. There's very few global lifestyle brands. What if you do hit $10 million? Maybe that's where you want to stay. Maybe that's a comfortable living, and maybe you have people working for you, and it's okay to plateau somewhere and not get that extra pressure by trying to be everything. So I think again it's like criticism or feedback or advice. Really, you got to take it from the source. But in the end of the day, it's your gut. It's like you got to do what you believe it is, regardless of what somebody might tell you.
And then, we're talking also before about Fashion Week. Many times you focus a lot on doing a fashion show. It's a lot of money. It's not for every brand. What are other options that designers can look into and tap into? Well,
you can look at the difference between a runway show and a presentation. Runway show being, movement, presentation being stagnant. There's probably really no difference that much in cost or time or resources to put into that. I would say just studio market appointments. If you know editors and buyers are in town during Fashion Week and you invite them in over the course of a period of time, you have some nice food, you have some cappuccinos, really I just think that intimacy, which is really old-fashioned business, person to person, I think is good enough for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people also succeed digitally now, where they're taking the concept of a show, they're releasing it on Instagram, or in the instances where they can tap into friends or filmmakers, maybe they're making little films and they're releasing it. Because if you had a friend who was a filmmaker and was willing to make a little film with you, and the chances are you went to any editorial site, digital site, they're so hungry for content, they would take that in a minute. And so you could have your exclusive premiere on Fashionista or whatever site. So it can be a lot of things, but it definitely doesn't need to be the runway or the presentation until you're ready for that.
So let's talk education. We're here at Istituto Marangoni. This is an incredible facility. You work at the CFDA with 20 schools. What are the advantages of going to a fashion school, to a school that's specialized in this area? I took a tour of the installation, so tell us a little bit about your impressions.
The school is amazing, and what's great about this school is that this is just one hub of many hubs globally. So when you look at fashion as a global industry, you're very fortunate that you have fellow students elsewhere, and you have that perspective, and also a faculty that connects globally, and that's a rare opportunity for the students that are going there, because sometimes it's just very specific to a city. I would encourage anyone, no matter what it is you want to do, to go to school. I think for fashion school specifically, as you mentioned, you used the word mechanics, it really is about the mechanics. Just because you know how to dress really well doesn't make you a designer. You have to understand pattern making, construction, draping, all of that. And that requires someone who's a technician, someone who has experience. So I think that's where you get that core, that base, and then your vision or your creative thinking then layers on top of that. Again, you meet students and others, so you're building relationships. And in the old days, fashion school didn't really teach the business of fashion, but now schools are really incorporated that into the curriculum. The other side of it is not everybody's lucky enough or fortunate enough to go to school. And so there have been successful designers who have achieved that success, without going to a school. And what I always say to people there, young people particularly, is like, go work at the Gap. Like, start there. Like, fold sweaters and put them on the thing, because you're already putting yourself in that environment. And starting there in a store could lead you to store manager, could lead you to a regional manager, could lead you to San Francisco, to doing collaboration. So there's a lot of ways to get into fashion if you're not fortunate enough to be able to go to school.
So let's talk menswear. You just finalized the Men's Fashion Week in New York. Once an afterthought for many fashion brands, menswear now represents 40% of the global apparel market. And career opportunities are thriving. Menswear is growing at a faster rate than women's wear, and is projected to contribute over $480 billion to the global apparel and footwear market. It already represents that 40%. Do you see this growth continuing?
I do. The truth is, women's is fashion business, the majority of the business. So when we have designers who are menswear designers that have done some programs like the CFA Fashion Fund, and their mentors and advisors spend time with them, they're always like, you should do women's, because usually it breaks down like 70 women's, 30 men's. But you're right, that men's industry is growing, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think guys in general, and I'm stereotyping here, they're not really like going to the stores that much. Now they can just go online to Bonobos or Amazon or anywhere, so it's super easy for a guy to shop now. Before it was maybe a little bit more of a hassle. I also think that you have now such a symbiotic connection to arts like music and also acting, but sports as well. These guys have really kind of mainstream fashion and have taken great steps and risks in the way they dress. Because you look at like NBA teams when sometimes like they're going to whatever playoffs or whatever they go to, they come off the plane and it used to be like these like in blue business suits. Now these guys are in Tom Brown and other really cool designers. So I think guys that didn't really think fashion are seeing people in a comfort zone that they're comfortable in dressing a certain way, and I think it's pushing that. I also think it's tech pushing that, because look at Mark Zuckerberg, right? What do we all think he wears? Hoodies to work all the time. So when we see Mark Zuckerberg in a suit, it looks really weird. But that tech industry has had a very casual way about dressing, and so guys that have been dressing like that are looking, and they got money, so they're like, they want to spend a couple of grand on a cashmere hoodie or something. So I think that's been fueling it as well.
Right. It's a very competitive market, and brands need to stand out. And you really have to work hard on the brand awareness. In your opinion, what makes, and you see a lot of brands, what makes a fashion brand stand from the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, it's core to the DNA of the brand, like staying true to what it is that brand started as. That doesn't mean you don't evolve, but sometimes brands are like all over the place. One season it's streetwear, next season it's tailoring. There has to be some consistency into what you do. I think it's the way brands market themselves now. I do think that celebrity, whether we like the Kardashians or not, I mean, a Kardashian wears something you made, you will sell out of that. I guarantee you that. And so, as much as that is uncomfortable for some people in our industry, tapping into that celebrity culture, I think really helps a brand stand out. And also taking control of how brands market themselves. They don't need to buy ads in publications anymore, and they don't need to rely so much on press. They have the ability to create their own content, and so I would say owning your own marketing and content creation as well.
In those interviews for the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, what are the mistakes that you have seen designers do when they are presenting to this amazing group of judges, including yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, by judges, I mean Anna Wintour and the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it's Anna Wintour, it's Diane von Furstenberg, it's Joseph Altazara. And so what we do is every year we pick 10 designers out of a pool of maybe 100 that apply. And they're the 10 finalists. We just picked them last week. And so from last Wednesday now until November, they have a series of things they have to do. They have to do a design challenge, and as Eva said, they have to present to the judges actually Wednesday morning this week.
Zero stress.
Yeah, zero stress. It's at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's like has anybody ever seen the Amazon show, the Fashion Fund? Yeah? Okay, so you know the format. It's like a long table, and we all sit there like this. Some of us have glasses on, sunglasses on.
And if you're not a morning person, it's like,
No,
forget it, don't even apply.
And we're ready at 8. That means they have to be there at 6. So, and so they have 15 minutes, and they have 5 looks they have to show, a past, current, and future look. And the biggest mistake is not being able to talk about the brand. If you're a designer and I ask you, who's your customer? If you can't answer that so quickly in one sentence, you shouldn't be in business. Or if I ask you, what is your projected gross sales for the year? If you, like that, you shouldn't be in business. And it's not being prepared. The truth is, if you're a designer, particularly today, with cameras on us all the time, you need to be also very media savvy. You can't get all shy in front of people like that. You have to have confidence, and if you don't, you need to learn how to have better public speaking. But like, you have to be able to answer a question very quickly. And if you don't know the answer, you need to be able to bullshit it very quickly. It's just like, you know, that's half of it right there.
A little secret is that Stina is shy, and I'm also shy, and nobody believes us.
Yeah, it's true, we are.
And it's like, you know, but you have to force yourself.
You have to force yourself to do it.
Be out there.
And also to have fun with it. Like once we asked one of the designers, because if you win the CFA Vogue Fashion Fund, you win $400,000 and mentor, which is really the biggest prize, the mentor. But once we asked the designer what he would do if he won the $400,000, and he said very quickly, without pause, I'm going to get a new Mercedes. And he didn't mean it, but it was funny. It made us laugh, and it broke the ice. So, I mean, to have fun with it as well.
So one of the things that Hakan Baykan, which is the president of Instituto, has in mind, and when we sat down for the first time, he told me, my objective is to make Miami a fashion hub. And many of you, you know, that are from Miami would say, but Miami is already a fashion place. You know, designers come, and we have events, and we sip champagne, and no complaints to that. But making Miami a fashion hub is by also creating a place where designers can establish their businesses here, really creating a community where collaborations can happen. I mean, there are many great brands that are here based in Miami with their operations, one of them being Alexis. And you know, many people don't know about that. And creating a place also where designers, emerging designers, more established designers can get talent from, that they can evaluate the work of the students so that they can also be best prepared for the market out there. How do you see Miami in general, and what recommendations would you give us?
Well, I think Miami is such a vibrant, colorful, fun city, and I don't think anyone in the country wouldn't want to be in Miami and spend more time in Miami. And we talked about this a little bit upstairs privately on just fashion hubs, right? We know that the 4 big fashion hubs are New York, London, Milan, and Paris, but there's a lot of opportunity for other cities to really own something. And I think the success of that is just having the DNA of the city as the foundation of whatever that fashion platform is. You're already off to a good start because you have an ecosystem, a piece of the ecosystem, which is the students, right? And education. So a lot of the kids here can graduate, and hopefully some will stay in Miami and want to start their businesses here after they work or work for someone. It's creating an ecosystem or a community. I think Miami has obviously it's a hub to Latin America. So I think there is, as already has been happening, but even in a bigger way, a way to really own that market. Both with Latin American designers coming to Miami trying to penetrate the US market. And let's remember, the United States is a very big market and probably one of the more desirable ones for international designers to be successful in. So I definitely see that as a hub, as a platform, but also for American designers to amplify their own message back to Latin America. So that is for sure. And if you understand Fashion Week, and Fashion Week's a lot of things now, and we don't have enough time to talk about like what Fashion Week is or shouldn't be or is, but one thing Fashion Week has been traditionally is in September, you're showing spring clothes. In February, you're showing fall clothes. You're showing the clothes 6 months ahead of time, and then in the traditional way, the buyer would write the order and the editor would say, this is the look I want to print. That's kind of going away. But I think, as we talked about earlier, the see now, buy now, which is kind of a buzz conversation we've been having in fashion, could really be something Miami owns, right? You could really do some great, and your idea, like, let's not even call it Fashion Week anymore. Let's call it Fashion Festival or Fashion whatever. But imagine designers coming here and doing a big entertainment, like a Victoria's Secret-like show. So it's fun to go to, you have a good time, and then you can go and buy the clothes right away in the stores. I think that's a platform that a city like Miami could really use. Huh?
We just need the models.
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of good-looking people here.
Yeah. But talking about the change in how people want fashion, and people want fashion now, and it's a big challenge because there's a lot of internal areas that need to be optimized before we get into from the idea, the concept, the production to what's in store. And there's also the challenges of product development and many others. So how do you see that with all the pressures brands have into selling? How do you resolve that?
Yeah, I think that the channels of how designers have sold traditionally are dated in many ways, right? I think the idea of hoping that one of the big retailers is going to come in and buy your collection. You have to produce that collection with what money, you're going to have to borrow the money to produce it, and then you're paying a high interest on that to pay your factor back, and then if it doesn't sell, the stores are sending it back to you, and then you got to get charged back for that. Like, that's really, really hard. And I think it's taking control. Designers need to take control. They need to take control of their inventory. They need to take control of their supply chains, and they need to take control of their own distribution. So the direct-to-consumer approach is really the way to do that, because you're selling what you hold as inventory. It's your inventory. You can do what you want with it. You're your own buyer. You're buying from yourself to sell it, and it's not that hard to really create a e-commerce site or to create those direct-to-consumer opportunities. So I would say that for a designer, particularly a younger designer who's young in business, you don't have any parameters. A designer who's 40 years in business and does business a certain way, kind of hard culturally to shift into a different business model, and a lot of them are trying to figure it out and struggling. But for someone young, if you can figure that out and you can ride that's where you're going to have success, and you'll be able to manage.
So first it was the death of print, and now it's the death of retail. It seems every morning when I wake up, there's a new story, that article that talks about the death of the stores. I grew up, and the way that we did outings, yes, it was to the park, but it also was to the shopping stores and to the shopping malls. And now when I go to the stores, they're empty. And that's a big shift. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I agree. I used to love going back to school shopping to Woolworths with my mother and having lunch at the counter. Right? There was an experience to that, and the fun of it went away. And so I think that shopping, to get people back into stores and to make the going to a store interesting, it has to be experiential, right? Like look at even, like there's got to be another reason to go there. I think that's really cool. You see a lot of stores now that are selling product, but now they're also a coffee shop or a cafe. So I think having some hospitality or something that's experiential within that store, a whiskey bar, whatever that might be, brings you into the store for other reasons. And we did something for a few years, many of you may know it, called Fashions Night Out. And the idea of Fashions Night Out was to create fun. Bring, really, Christian? You're not your phone ring. And he's a CFJ member, he knows that. I'm teasing you. Is Fashions Night Out was to create experiences, entertainment, personalities. And it was so successful that it killed itself because we had so many people out in the streets, and then it became too big of a beast. But I think that experience. Also, what's interesting, which you see now too, is some of the digital retailers who started in the digital space are now opening brick and mortar, or even in the instance of some retailers, they're online retailers, they're opening stores, but you can't buy anything in the store. You can just go in there and try the jacket on, feel the check, and see the jacket, and then you order it right online. So I think to continue to evolve, it just has to be a reason to want to go there beyond just the shopping.
There's also e-commerce, and everybody wants to be Amazon. But there's a big, there's a big conversation on will the luxury brands, will the top brands go into Amazon, giving them that power of distribution. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Amazon's been a great partner of CFDA for a number of years, and I'm a huge Amazon shopper. I love Amazon, and I think it's so convenient and so easy. And I think that it still hasn't found its place in terms of some of the big brands. I just had dinner recently with someone that worked at eBay, and eBay has also tried to be that online platform for brands. I think what you'll see at Amazon is what we've seen, some kind of more mass brands that work really well. They are brands that have more personality or perhaps more unique and specific. It's just as easy for them to partner with someone on the back end and create their own digital sites and their own e-commerce. The one that I would be watching out for more than Amazon, if I was an American designer, the one that I would be looking at is JD.com or Alibaba in China, because there is opportunity there. And they're both humongous companies that are really willing to invest in American brands and help them create platforms there.
Right. Burberry is changing its product release strategy and embracing more frequent drops. Meanwhile, luxury e-commerce sites like The Real, which is doing really well, and the Stern Collective do big businesses, but the resale market faces challenges ahead. In your expertise, what are those challenges?
For resale? Well, I actually think resale has challenges, but is an interesting market and opportunity. It's probably a secondary market. I don't really think a designer is necessarily going to go on resale site and sell inventory that they have left over, right? So it's really a secondary market that feeds away or takes away from a primary brand. So I'm not really sure that the answer to that, but as a consumer, I think those resale sites are great. The thing that I think is even more interested is the idea of a shared economy, is that you probably have an amazing closet full of clothes, and creating a way for you to actually rent those clothes or let other people wear them. You know, Airbnb for our closets. I mean, that to me seems really interesting, because what's great about the secondary market or the shared economy, as you look at the environment and sustainability, it just really is a more responsible way of doing business.
The VP of Pirelli Tire North America said that future leaders will need 5 major skills. They need to have a big picture vision, deep listening, authenticity, courage, and humility. And this really goes to the core of sustainable fashion, which is a big conversation nowadays. Do you agree with?
I do agree. I've worked at CFDA since 2006, like 12 years. And in the beginning when I started, there wasn't a designer that would talk about sustainability. And we saw at CFDA early on, we saw the importance or the direction that we needed to go in with the industry, but we didn't really get the interest. So we started some programs that supported younger brands. There's something called the CFDA Lexus Fashion Initiative. Rosario Dawson has a brand called Studio 189, and she just won this one. She won $90,000. And we pair young brands with mentors and advisors, workshops, business development, all on making a more sustainable business. And so we saw the interest starting with some smaller brands, but over the last 18 months, like big brands, like $100 million, $250 million brands have come to us and said, we're ready now. So I think that, and you see in Italy, Carlo Capizzi, my counterpart at Camera D'Amoto, which is the CFDA in Milan, he's been working on an event called the Green Carpet Awards, where they've been putting on the stage and celebrating not just the designers, but the employees that are actually working. So I just think if you're not thinking sustainability, you are not going to make it. And even with students, we do a bunch of stuff with other schools, and when I've seen students, every student I meet, that's what they care about.
Right.
That's their business model. And I also am a judge for something called the Global Change Award, which is a prize that H&M gives every year. And what that prize has educated me on is just the development. Like this one young couple, they made a thread system that at a certain heat level, the thread disintegrates, because one of the problems with recycling is when you have different materials, you have to pull it apart, right? And it's very time consuming. So what you have to do is like go, like this laser thing, and it just kind of falls apart. Or developing fiber from mushrooms or grape waste, or I think that is so interesting and where we all should be paying attention.
If there would be a recipe for success, what would it be? And if there would be a recipe to prevent failure, what that would be as well?
The recipe to prevent failure is to stop worrying about we're talking about designers, right? Or just
yes.
Yeah. The opportunity to prevent failure is to stop looking over your shoulder and paying attention to what your fellow designers are doing. Because that just messes your own work up and gets in your head and can be confusing. So stay kind of really focused on your own work. Obviously have historical references. You should know the history of fashion. You should know the great designers before you, and you should know kind of how the decades have changed with fashion. But you just really, just keep your head, I guess that's failure to, this recipe for success and the recipe is the same answer, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Is just do your own thing and not worry so much about what somebody else is doing.
I talk a lot about well-being, where success is measured by the things that make you happy. We see too many people in any industry burnt out, stressed out, wanting more. What would you tell them? You spend your days very busy. You're surrounding yourself by the world of fashion and the business of fashion. So what is success for Stephen Cole?
For me, is balance. It's probably like a cliche answer, but I'm always working at some level. I always have my iPhone on me, so I'm always kind of looking at that. Although I have a new app now that tracks how long I've held my phone, so I'm trying to get lower on it. That's important to me, is not to disconnect so that I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff at the same time. But it's balanced. Like for me, I like to go out of the city. I like to go into the woods. I like to take pictures of my dog and post them on Instagram. That kind of stuff is just, I like to hike, I like to kayak. I guess I like nature. I find nature to be completely relaxing, and I also think if I was a designer, I think that would be my greatest source of inspiration, nature.
You know what I see a lot? I see people like Stephen, and many of you don't know him, but he's really nice. He's tough when he has to be, but always with a kind word. He's always supports designers, tries to help and mentor, and I think that generosity makes him really unique, and why he has been such a respected figure in this business. And yes, he answers all of his emails. And what I see a lot is that very successful people answer all their emails. So if you don't, hint. Part of being successful. So let's go to the Q&A. I know that we might have extended our time, but if anybody has any questions for Stephen, yeah, there are a couple of people.
You can ask me anything you want.
Hi, Stephen. A really big issue and uncertainty for a lot of people in this room is the idea of immigration. And Miami being what it is, especially with the students here who come from other places, Venezuela, Colombia. We know the CFDA has teamed up with, I believe it's FWD.US in terms of immigration policy. With this important midterm election coming up in a couple of months, what should we be looking for, number one, in our candidates? And number two, how do you feel about the whole H-1B and O-1 visas, and expanding those and reforming those, and creating startup visas for many of us who want to start a business here, but we're not citizens?
It's a good question, and an appropriate city to ask it in. After the election, the last presidential election, we came back in January, and we realized that as an organization, we're not a political organization, we're a trade organization and a philanthropic organization. But we knew that because we were CFDA, we had a certain visibility and base that we needed to take on certain social issues and incorporate them to work. So for example, during both February and September fashion weeks in 2017, one, we partnered with ASLU, one, we partnered with Planned Parenthood, and we were able to get connected to Forward.US. And they're lobbyists, they're advocates for immigration reform. So they've really helped educate us on the different visas, which are complicated and often make it easier just to ignore hiring someone because you don't want to go through the cost or the legal process of getting someone here to work for you. So, I think this is an industry that was built on immigrants. I would say more than half of our members come from another part of the world. We have kids coming to this country to go to school. and the best students aren't able to stay here and they're going back home or elsewhere when they want to stay here. Unfortunately, I don't see us getting much leeway on any kind of change. So we've done 2 papers, both, the second one is just an update of the first one. And actually in the last immigration report and paper we did, it actually looks at Miami. There's a case study of a designer here from Miami in that paper. So there are a lot of recommendations in that, and I agree the different visas should be opened up more, and they're a little bit dated. Not just for designers, but also for other people in the industry, like models. Midterm elections, you just gotta know your candidates and know who believes in DACA, and that is candidates that don't believe in a wall, believe in DACA, that believe in what has really built this country and in our industry. So that would be my answer to you there. That was a very good question, well written down, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, who else?
Me over here. Good afternoon, Stephen. Good afternoon, Eva. I'm a student here at Istituto Marangoni, and something that I wanted to ask you, and you yourself if you want to answer as well, Eva, is what do you perceive the American fashion industry is in need of?
I think to succeed in fashion now, don't approach it, and this is what we're in need of. We're in need of entrepreneurial business people. We're in need of people who are going to come at it and look at it as a business and then as a designer. Traditionally, it started as a designer, you had your name on the label, and then you started a business. The real success is coming from people who are starting it as a business about design. And so that's what we're in need of. We're in need of people who are really business-minded or have the capacity to be business-focused.
Thank you.
Somebody up here, I think, I wanted to ask.
Thank you. Going back to the topic of sustainability, are there any plans to actually restrict or monitor the way companies are becoming more socially responsible? Because for a lot of brands, it has turned into more of a marketing initiative than a true eco-friendly or socially responsible activity. So I'm wondering, as the CFDA, obviously you have some sort of power to influence what the companies and the brands are doing, especially the luxury brands that tend to set up a standard for everybody else. So I'd love to know what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, everything we do is about education and creating awareness and connecting to resources and information. We've never been an organization that polices or monitors. We did something, we started something a few years ago called the CFDA Health Initiative, which was about models and health and young girls under the runway. And a lot of people wanted us to get body mass index or doctor notes from models who were working around to make sure they're healthy, but that wasn't our approach. Our approach was to talk about the maturity level of a young model, nutrition, and other topics. And we were very successful in increasing the age of models from under 16 to at least 16 and up. And so that's been our same approach with sustainability, is just education and awareness. There are a lot of organizations that do exactly that. There's something called the hate index. I think it's HIGHT. It's a very complicated process, but we've actually helped designers connect to that. You just go through a series of questions, and that's what helps a brand monitor. So there are a lot of industry organizations that do that kind of thing, but that, for us, we're really about education, awareness, and information. All right, in blue.
Hi, I want to ask you a question about China. China is a big manufacturing hub for America. And how do you see that changing now that there's talks about tariffs being placed on all kinds of
Yeah, we're having a big meeting next week, I think, that we quickly organized on the impact of these tariffs. And so we're very uncertain ourselves. I think what we'll see is or I guess the approach to it is that we would see things made more here in the States, but it's complicated. It's not just how things are made, but where's the fabric from, and where's the trim come from. So I don't know what that is, but I know that it's the tariffs are going to be a huge problem for a lot of young brands that make things in China, and so we're just putting together now industry experts and putting together a meeting for our designers to really kind of talk through that and get a better understanding of it.
Hi.
Hi.
Right behind. You touched a little bit about how the gap between showing your collection and then launching 6 months after is closing, and that kind of buying model is fading away. I wanted to ask a little bit more in detail. How do you see the drop signs applying to smaller brands? Do you really recommend smaller or newer brands to make smaller collections and launch more frequently and show newness in their own project, whatever it is, their own vision, showing newness and going faster to the market to offer their vision? Is that something that you recommend?
And I think the drop concept is really successful. Clearly Supreme, we all know, has killed it. And you see retailers now, like major retailers like Barney's does, Drop Weekend, both in Los Angeles and in Manhattan, where they work with designer brands to kind of create that product. I think it's what you were saying earlier about this oversaturation of designers. You're creating a product that's desirable and hard to get, that will actually help build brand power. So I do think there's a lot of, it makes sense, the drop model. Rag & Bone is another good example of a brand that's been very, very successful, came out of the CFA Vogue Fashion Fund, has operated traditionally, and is trying to play around with the drop idea. So I do think it's a good idea, and I do think it's a good idea when you're showing clothes publicly. The closer you can show them to when the consumer can buy them, the better. So, yeah.
And I don't know how we're doing in time, but I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. This is really wonderful. I'm bringing back the sustainability term again, and I wanted to know if with the CFDA awards, that is a category that you look for the winner. If you ask them one of those tough questions when you judge them, what is the environmental and social impact that your clothes will have?
Well, so there's the CFDA Fashion Awards, which is like the Oscars of fashion, and there's the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund. So in the application for CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, that is a question we ask. And that is something that we look at. With the CFDA Awards, we haven't added any award, particularly on sustainability, but this year we did something really interesting. Our red carpet, which wasn't red, I think it was blue, was made out of all recycled bottles. And you wouldn't have even known it. And what was even better, we did the event at the Brooklyn Museum, and they loved the carpet so much they kept it for the museum. So, you know, it's often not just about the product or the manufacturing product, but also how you operate your business too. But it's definitely something we look at with CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, but specifically we have the CFDA Lexus Fashion Initiative, which is like Fashion Fund, where we're picking designers and mentoring and giving them business grants, and it's only about sustainability. And then the other program we have is called Launchpad, which is for designers 0 to 3 years in business, again, picking 5 designers. And I would say of the 5, 3 are at least focused on sustainability. One of the ones, and this will, I guess, be the last thing, back to plastic, that we funded last year, is a brand called Genesee. Bottles of water to Flint so people had clean water, and then the downside of that was you have all these plastic bottles. So what these 3 young people did was they created a process to make eyewear frames out of plastic bottles. And not only are they recycling the plastic, but they're also, Flint is a depressed city, they're also manufacturing the product in Flint itself. So that's a good example of a sustainable type brand that was part of another program.
So I really want to thank everyone for coming, for being so patient in this first session of a conversation with. I want to take a moment to thank the people that are behind the scenes, you know, the entire staff and team of Istituto Marangoni, my only team person that works with me, for their patience. And I think that the only thing that we didn't ask Stephen was his horoscope sign. Now there are the eclipses and, you know, the lunar, the solar. I get lost, but
yeah. This will make you stay 2 more minutes, but when I interviewed for CFDA, there was a selection committee and they asked me a lot of questions. And it was Diane von Furstenberg, Joseph Booth, Stan Herman, who was president, Jeffrey Banks, a bunch of people, and asking all kinds of questions. And then the very last question that they asked me was, what was my sign? And they all had their notebooks and they were taking notes of the whole thing. And I said, I'm a Libra. And they all shut their notebooks and I said, thank you very much. So I guess the key to success is Libra.
Sign compatibility. And you know, one more hint. The first day that Steve and I met, although we were both in fashion, we did not talk about fashion.
No.
I think that sometimes we forget that connecting with people is really looking into the eyes and the soul of people.
Sure.
Understanding them, respecting them, because at the end of the day, you can have a really good product, but people believe in people. So let's have more empathy.
I'm studying the Master of Fashion Design.
Everything is fashion.
I'm just going to do something that I like.
My dream is to have a brand of
Enjoy.
my own.
I love the school.
My name is Chris, I'm 20 and I'm from Barcelona.
Le stylisme. Je fréquente le cours de stylisme.
Studio fashion design.
The meaning of fashion.
I want to be a fashion designer.
Start my own business.